Princess Zarathiel stood at the viewing port of her father's flagship, watching the small human transport dock with their massive vessel. The sight filled her with familiar dread. Today marked the beginning of her arranged marriage to a creature from one of the galaxy's most primitive worlds. "This is beneath our bloodline," she muttered to herself, her forearms crossed in obvious displeasure. Her crystalline skin caught the starlight, creating rainbow patterns that marked her as royalty among the Velterani people. The Velterani Empire stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their technology could reshape planets. Their warriors commanded fleets that numbered in the millions, and their scientists had unlocked secrets that made them nearly immortal. They were, by every measure, the most advanced species in known space. And now she was being married off to a human. Emperor Kethmore, her father, had explained the political necessity. The human world sat at a strategic junction between Velterani space and the territory of their enemies, the machine intelligence collective known as the Nexus. An alliance with humanity would provide a buffer zone and early warning system against Nexus expansion. "The humans fight well enough," her father had said, "and their reproduction rate is useful for maintaining garrison forces on frontier worlds." Useful. That was the highest praise Zara had ever heard any Velterani give to humanity. The transport bay doors hissed open, and the human delegation emerged. Zara studied them from her elevated position in the observation gallery. Most looked exactly as she'd expected, primitive bipeds in crude environmental suits, moving with the awkward gait of creatures evolved for a single world's gravity. But one human walked differently. He moved through the artificial gravity field as if he'd been born in it, his steps measured and purposeful. Unlike the others who kept their helmet visors dark, his face was clearly visible. Strong features, dark hair, and eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the vast hangar bay without showing the overwhelm she'd expected. "That one must be Marcus Webb," said her aide, a younger Velterani named Hythal. "You're intended." Zara examined him more carefully. The human appeared physically unremarkable by Velterani standards. No extra arms, no crystalline skin, no obvious biotechnological enhancements. His lifespan would be barely a century even with their best medical intervention. By the time she reached middle age, he would be ancient. "Has he any noteworthy accomplishments?" she asked. Hythal consulted his data tablet. "The records are sparse. He served in their military for several years. Some kind of technical specialist. No major decorations or commands listed. His family holds no significant political position on his homeworld." "Wonderful," Zara said. "Father has married me to a common soldier." The wedding ceremony took place 3 days later aboard the neutral station that served as a diplomatic meeting point between the two species. The human delegation had brought their own traditions, while the Velterani maintained their ancient customs. The result was an awkward blending of rituals that satisfied neither side completely. Marcus stood calmly throughout the proceedings, speaking his vows in carefully memorized Velterani. His pronunciation was adequate but heavily accented, drawing barely concealed amusement from some of the Velterani nobles in attendance. Zara spoke her own vows with cool precision, treating the entire affair as a diplomatic formality. When the time came for the traditional joining of hands, she was surprised by the steadiness of his grip. Most humans she'd met seemed nervous or intimidated around her people. Marcus showed neither emotion. After the ceremony, they attended a reception where the two delegations mingled uncomfortably. Zara watched as various Velterani nobles attempted conversations with their human counterparts, usually resulting in stilted exchanges about weather patterns and trade routes. Marcus, however, seemed to be listening more than talking. She noticed him observing everything. The way the Velterani servants moved through the crowd, the subtle power dynamics in conversations, even the architecture of the space station itself. "Your husband is very quiet," observed Lady Nethara, one of her mother's closest advisors. "Is this typical human behavior?" "I wouldn't know," Zara replied. "This is my first extended interaction with any of them." Later that evening, they were shown to quarters aboard the Velterani flagship for the journey back to the capital world. The rooms were lavishly appointed by human standards but merely adequate for Velterani nobility. 2 bedrooms connected by a shared living space, a diplomatic compromise that acknowledged the marriage while respecting the fact that they were strangers. Zara found Marcus standing at the main viewport, studying the star patterns outside. He'd changed from his formal wedding attire into simple clothes that looked almost military in their practicality. "Having second thoughts about leaving your homeworld?" she asked. He turned toward her, and she was struck again by how direct his gaze was. Most humans avoided eye contact with Velterani, finding their solid-colored irises unsettling. "No second thoughts," he said. "I knew this assignment would take me far from Earth." "Assignment?" The word choice seemed odd. "Marriage to you. It's my job now." Zara felt a flash of irritation. "How romantic. You make it sound like a military posting." "In a way, isn't it?" He gestured toward the viewport. "Two civilizations forming an alliance. We're the symbolic link between our peoples." His matter-of-fact tone annoyed her more than nervousness would have. "And what do you expect to accomplish in this assignment?" "Learn about your people. Try to be useful. Maybe prevent a war." "Prevent a war?" Zara laughed, the sound carrying a sharp edge. "Human. Do you have any idea what the Velterani Empire is capable of? Your entire species exists at our sufferance. We could sterilize every human world before your fleets could even muster a response." Marcus nodded calmly. "Yes, I've read the tactical assessments. Your advantage in firepower and technology is overwhelming. Then you understand the reality of this situation. You're not here as an equal partner. You're here because your species needs protection from the Nexus, and we need forward bases in human space. This marriage is a convenience, nothing more." "I understand," he said simply. Something about his quiet acceptance bothered her more than protests would have. She'd expected him to argue, to defend human capabilities, to show some pride in his species. Instead, he just acknowledged facts. Over the following days of travel, Zara found herself studying her new husband with growing curiosity. He spent most of his time reading, both human texts he'd brought and Velterani materials she'd given him access to. His learning speed was impressive for a human, but she attributed that to genetic modifications his people must have made. What puzzled her was his behavior around the crew. Most humans she'd observed were either terrified of Velterani or aggressively trying to prove themselves worthy. Marcus did neither. He treated everyone with the same quiet respect, from the lowliest maintenance worker to the ship's captain. More surprisingly, the crew seemed to respond well to him. She overheard a group of engineers discussing modifications to the ship's artificial gravity system, and Marcus had somehow joined their conversation, not as an expert, but as someone asking intelligent questions and making observations that the engineers found useful. "Your husband knows something about mechanical systems," Captain Veltheon mentioned to her privately. "My engineers say his questions helped them identify a potential efficiency improvement." "He was a technical specialist in their military," Zara said dismissively. "Basic maintenance skills." But she found herself paying more attention to his interactions. During a tour of the ship's primary systems, Marcus asked about the quantum resonance chambers that powered their faster-than-light drives. His questions suggested an understanding of principles that should have been far beyond human education. When she confronted him about it later, he shrugged. "I read a lot. And I worked on some similar systems in the human fleet. Humans don't have quantum resonance technology. Not exactly the same, no. But the basic principles of containing exotic matter aren't that different. Your people just do it much more efficiently." The casual way he spoke about containing exotic matter, something that had taken Velterani scientists centuries to master, left her speechless. 3 weeks into their journey, the ship received a priority message that changed everything. A Nexus probe fleet had been detected in human space, moving toward one of the outer colonies. The probe fleets were how the machine intelligence tested defenses before launching full invasions. Captain Veltheon convened an emergency briefing with his senior staff and, somewhat reluctantly, included both Zara and Marcus, since they were technically diplomatic representatives. "The probe fleet consists of 12 vessels," the tactical officer reported. "Standard Nexus configuration, 6 heavy assault units, 4 support craft, and 2 intelligence-gathering ships. They're approaching the human colony of New Jakarta." Zara studied the tactical display. New Jakarta was a minor human outpost with minimal defenses. The colonists would be slaughtered, "What are human fleet assets in that sector?" she asked. "2 patrol frigates and a supply depot," the intelligence officer replied. "Completely inadequate to resist a Nexus probe fleet. Estimated time until contact? 36 hours. Captain Veltheon turned to Marcus. "Is there anything you can tell us about New Jakarta's defenses that might not be in our intelligence reports?" Marcus studied the display for a long moment. The colony has approximately 12,000 civilian residents. Standard defensive grid includes plasma cannon batteries and shield generators, powered by a fusion reactor complex. The patrol frigates are older human designs, tough but limited firepower. "So the colony will fall," Zara said. "Probably," Marcus agreed. Unless what?" Marcus pointed to a section of the tactical display. "The asteroid field around the colony. It's dense and unstable. Ship sensors have trouble penetrating it. And the gravitational variations make navigation dangerous. The Nexus will simply stand off and bombard from range," the tactical officer pointed out. "They don't need to navigate the asteroids. Not if they're following standard Nexus doctrine," Marcus said. "Probe fleets gather intelligence on defensive capabilities before withdrawing. They want to study human resistance techniques before the main invasion. That means they'll try to engage the colony defenses directly." Captain Veltheon looked skeptical. "Even so, the outcome seems inevitable." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his eyes still focused on the display. When he spoke, his voice carried a strange certainty. "Permission to send a message to New Jakarta?" "Aye." "What kind of message?" Zara asked. "Tactical suggestions." The captain looked at Zara, who shrugged. "It can't make their situation worse." Marcus moved to the communications console and began composing a transmission. Zara watched him work, noting the speed and precision of his typing. The message he crafted was complex, full of technical specifications and tactical recommendations that seemed far beyond what a simple human soldier should know. "How do you know all this?" she asked quietly. Marcus paused his typing and looked at her. For the first time since they'd met, she saw something other than calm acceptance in his eyes. Something that might have been sadness. "Because I helped design some of these systems," he said. "And because I've seen what the Nexus does to colonies that don't resist properly." Before Zara could ask what he meant, Marcus finished his message and transmitted it to New Jakarta. Then he returned to studying the tactical display with an intensity that made her realize she had vastly underestimated her human husband. The battle for New Jakarta would reveal just how much she didn't know about the quiet man her father had chosen for her to marry. 18 hours later, Zara found herself in the ship's command center, watching the impossible unfold on the tactical display. The Nexus probe fleet had arrived at New Jakarta exactly as predicted. 12 vessels emerged from hyperspace and began their standard approach toward the human colony. But instead of the quick slaughter everyone expected, something extraordinary was happening. "The human defensive fire is unusually coordinated," reported the tactical officer, his voice filled with confusion. Zara studied the display. The colony's plasma cannon batteries weren't just firing at the Nexus ships. They were creating a complex pattern of energy fields that seemed to channel the attacking vessels toward specific areas of the asteroid field. "They're hurting them," Captain Veltheon observed. "But toward what purpose?" Marcus stood quietly beside the display, his eyes tracking multiple data streams simultaneously. He'd been monitoring the battle communications for hours, occasionally making notes on a human datapad. "The asteroids," he said simply. "What about them?" Zara asked. "Watch the gravitational sensors. The humans aren't just hiding defensive positions in the asteroid field. They're using the field itself as a weapon." As if responding to his words, the display suddenly showed massive energy spikes from within the asteroid field. 3 Nexus vessels that had been pursuing what appeared to be fleeing human fighters suddenly found themselves caught in gravitational anomalies that crushed their hulls like paper. "Impossible," breathed the science officer. "Those gravitational fields would require technology far beyond human capabilities." Marcus turned to look at him. "Not beyond human capabilities, beyond human technology." "There's a difference." "Explain," Zara commanded. "The humans at New Jakarta aren't using their own gravity manipulation devices. They're using the natural gravitational instabilities in the asteroid field, enhanced by precisely placed energy resonators. It's not about having better technology, it's about understanding how to work with what exists. The tactical officer's display chimed with new information. Princess, we're receiving detailed battle reports from New Jakarta. The human defensive coordinator is requesting permission to transmit tactical data to our vessel. Granted, Zara said immediately. The data stream that arrived was unlike anything she'd seen before. Not just raw sensor readings, but complex tactical analysis that predicted Nexus movement patterns with startling accuracy. The human coordinator wasn't just responding to the battle, they were staying ahead of it, anticipating enemy actions with an almost supernatural precision. How are they doing this? Captain Velthion demanded. Marcus was studying the data with obvious familiarity. Pattern recognition and systems thinking. Humans excel at finding connections that pure logic might miss. The Nexus operates on mathematical certainties. Humans operate on intuition backed by analysis. Intuition is hardly a military advantage, Zara said dismissively. Isn't it? Marcus gestured toward the display. Watch what happens next. The remaining Nexus vessels had regrouped and were attempting a different approach. Instead of pursuing individual targets, they formed a tight formation and began a systematic bombardment of the asteroid field itself, trying to eliminate the gravitational anomalies. But the human defenders seemed to have anticipated this too. As the Nexus ships focused their fire on the asteroids, the colony's patrol frigates emerged from concealed positions and struck at the probe fleet's flanks, not with superior firepower, but with perfect timing that caught the enemy ships in a crossfire while they were committed to their bombardment pattern. Remarkable, the science officer admitted. They turned the enemy's logical response into a trap. The Nexus thinks in terms of optimal solutions, Marcus explained. They calculate the most efficient approach and execute it perfectly. Humans think in terms of possibilities. We consider what the enemy might do, then create situations where all their options lead to disadvantages. Zara found herself studying her husband with new interest. You speak as if you've fought the Nexus before. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I have. Where? When? Human space hasn't seen Nexus incursions since before you were born. Not in human space. Before Zara could pursue that cryptic answer, the communication officer announced an incoming priority transmission from New Jakarta. The image that appeared on the main screen showed a human woman in military uniform, her face streaked with sweat and debris. This is Colonel Sarah Chen, commanding New Jakarta Defense. We've successfully repelled the Nexus probe fleet, but we need immediate assistance with casualty evacuation and damage assessment. Captain Velthion leaned forward. Colonel, this is the Velterani vessel, Eternal Dawn. We have medical facilities available. What is your casualty count? We have medical facilities available. We have medical facilities available. 17 dead, 43 wounded. Could have been much worse if not for the tactical consultation we received. Colonel Chen looked directly at the camera. I need to speak with whoever sent us those defensive recommendations. They saved a lot of lives today. All eyes turned to Marcus. He stepped forward, coming into view of the transmission. Colonel Chen, this is Marcus Webb. The colonel's expression changed immediately. Her tired face lit up with recognition and something that looked like relief. Commander Webb? Sir, I didn't realize you were in this sector. Thank you for the tactical package. It worked exactly as you predicted. You executed it perfectly, Sarah. Your people should be proud. With respect, sir, we never could have seen the gravitational resonance possibilities without your analysis. The asteroids were just obstacles until you showed us how to turn them into allies. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. Commander, the human colonel was addressing Marcus with obvious respect and deference. This wasn't how junior officers spoke to technical specialists. After the transmission ended, the command center fell silent. Captain Velthion was the first to speak. Commander Webb? That human addressed you as a superior officer. Marcus nodded calmly. That's correct. But our intelligence reports listed you as a technical specialist with no command authority. Your intelligence reports were incomplete. Zara stepped closer to him. her forearms crossed in a gesture that demanded truth. Then perhaps you should provide complete information. Who are you, really? Marcus met her gaze steadily. Marcus Webb, former commanding officer of the Human Defense Force's Deep Space Operations Division. Retired from active service 6 months ago to accept this diplomatic assignment. Deep Space Operations, the science officer repeated slowly. That's the human unit responsible for long-range reconnaissance and first contact scenarios with unknown species, Marcus added quietly. The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. You've encountered other races, besides us and the Nexus. Several. Are there others fighting the Nexus? There were. The simple past tense carried a weight that silenced the entire command center. Captain Velthion's voice was careful. Were? Marcus turned back to the tactical display, where the debris of the defeated Nexus probe fleet was being analyzed by human salvage crews. The Kethmori Federation. The Zephyrian Empire. The collective of rational minds. All advanced civilizations. All convinced they were superior to the primitive humans. He paused, watching as New Jakarta's defenders began the careful work of recovery and rebuilding. All extinct now. You're saying humans have witnessed the destruction of multiple spacefaring civilizations? Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Witnessed. Participated in their defense. Sometimes evacuated their survivors. Marcus turned back to face them. The Nexus has been expanding for over 2,000 years. Humanity has been tracking their progress for the last 300. 300 years? Captain Velthion looked stunned. But humans only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago, according to our records. According to your records of what we chose to share with you, Marcus corrected gently. Humans have been capable of interstellar travel for much longer. We just learned early that advertising advanced capabilities was a good way to attract unwanted attention. Zara felt her worldview shifting in fundamental ways. You're telling me that humanity has been deliberately concealing their technological capabilities? For centuries? Not concealing. Managing information. There's a difference. Marcus gestured toward the display showing New Jakarta's successful defense. We don't hide what we can do. We just don't advertise it until circumstances require demonstration. But why reveal this now? Marcus looked at her with something that might have been sadness. Because the Nexus expansion has reached a critical phase. They're preparing for their final push into this galactic region. When they come, they'll come with everything they have. And you think the Velterani Empire can't stop them? There was challenge in Zara's voice. I think the Velterani Empire is exactly the kind of advanced, confident civilization that the Nexus specializes in defeating. Marcus's voice remained calm, but his words carried an edge. You rely on superior technology and overwhelming force. The Nexus has superior technology and overwhelming force. When two civilizations fight that kind of war, the one with better logistics usually wins. And the Nexus has had 2,000 years to perfect their logistics. Exactly. Captain Velthion was studying tactical projections on his personal display. Then what do you suggest? If direct confrontation is futile, learn to fight differently. The way the colonists at New Jakarta fought today, the way humans have been fighting for 3 centuries. Marcus moved to the display controls and called up strategic maps of local space. The Nexus expects civilizations to meet them in glorious battle, fleet against fleet. They've optimized their tactics for that kind of warfare. And humans? Humans learned not to give the enemy the fight they want. The display now showed movement patterns throughout human space. Not just the official colonies and trade routes that the Velterani knew about, but a complex network of hidden installations, monitoring posts, and supply caches that stretched across dozens of systems. You've been preparing for this war for centuries, Zara realized. We've been preparing for survival, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. Admiral Kethmore's daughter looked at this quiet human she'd married, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not a primitive being elevated beyond his station, but a representative of a species that had been fighting a war she didn't even know was happening. What else don't we know about humans? She asked. Marcus turned toward the viewport where the stars stretched into infinity. Princess, if I told you everything humans know about this galaxy, We'd still be talking when the Nexus arrives. How long do we have? Based on their current expansion rate and resource allocation? Marcus was quiet for a moment, consulting data on his personal device. 18 months. Maybe 2 years if we're lucky. And in that time, you expect the Veltorani Empire to completely change our military doctrine to accommodate human tactical theories? No, Marcus said simply. In that time, I expect you to help me convince your father that the Veltorani Empire's best chance of survival is to let humans teach you how to disappoint your enemies. Zara stared at him, realizing that everything she thought she knew about this marriage, about humans, about the galaxy itself, had been wrong. The quiet man she'd dismissed as beneath her station might be the key to saving her entire civilization. And tomorrow, they would reach the Veltorani homeworld, where she would have to explain to the Emperor that his daughter's human husband might be the most important military asset in the Empire. The Imperial Court of Veltoran was a marvel of crystalline architecture and floating platforms that defied gravity itself. Thousands of nobles from across the Empire had gathered to witness Princess Zarathiel present her human husband to Emperor Kethmor. Zara watched the assembled crowd with growing anxiety. Word of the battle at New Jakarta had spread quickly through Imperial channels, along with whispered rumors about the human who had somehow orchestrated the impossible victory. Some courtiers looked curious, others skeptical, and a few seemed openly hostile to the idea that a primitive species might possess useful knowledge. Marcus stood beside her, wearing formal diplomatic robes that couldn't quite conceal his obvious discomfort with the ceremony. He'd been politely quiet during the journey to the imperial capital, answering her questions about human military capabilities with patient detail that revealed the staggering scope of what her people didn't know. "Are you ready for this?" she asked quietly as they waited in the preparation chamber. "Define ready," Marcus replied with the dry humor she was beginning to recognize. "I've briefed emperors before, but never ones who could disintegrate me with a thought if they didn't like my presentation. Father is reasonable, mostly. That's reassuring." The great doors opened, and they were announced to the court. Emperor Kethmor sat upon the throne of stars, a crystalline structure that seemed to contain actual stellar matter within its faceted surface. His presence filled the vast chamber with an authority that had commanded 3 galactic spiral arms for over a millennium. "Daughter." The Emperor's voice resonated through the chamber without technological amplification. "Present your husband to our court." Zara stepped forward with Marcus beside her. "Imperial Father, I present Marcus Webb of Earth, my husband and representative of the Human Alliance." The Emperor studied Marcus with eyes that held the accumulated wisdom of centuries. "Human, we have heard remarkable tales of your species' recent military performance. Some of our advisors suggest these tales are exaggerated." Marcus bowed precisely to the degree appropriate for his diplomatic status. "Your Imperial Majesty, I would be happy to discuss human capabilities and their relevance to the challenges facing this region of space." "Speak then. Tell us why the Veltorani Empire should value alliance with a species we could destroy without significant effort." A murmur ran through the assembled courtiers. The challenge was direct and potentially insulting, but Marcus seemed unperturbed. "Your Majesty raises an important point about relative capabilities," Marcus began. "The Veltorani Empire indeed possesses overwhelming technological and military superiority over humanity. This is not in dispute." Zara felt a chill. This wasn't the direction she'd hoped the conversation would take. "However," Marcus continued, "the same could be said of the Kethmori Federation, the Zephyrian Empire, and 6 other advanced civilizations that the Nexus has eliminated in the past 4 centuries. The chamber fell silent. Each of those civilizations possessed technology superior to anything the Nexus displayed in their territories. Each had fleets that outnumbered Nexus forces by significant margins. Each had defensive capabilities that should have been impregnable." Marcus paused, letting his words settle before continuing. "Each also fought the war exactly the way the Nexus wanted them to fight it." Emperor Kethmor leaned forward slightly. "And how do you suggest we fight differently?" "With respect, Your Majesty. That's not the right question. The question is whether you want to win a war or win battles." The Nexus doesn't care about individual battles. They care about the long-term conversion of all organic intelligence to machine processing. Conversion? Marcus gestured toward a courtier's personal data device, which had been built using some form of quantum crystalline matrix. Every piece of Nexus technology that interacts with organic systems leaves microscopic traces. Those traces accumulate over time, creating quantum entanglement patterns that allow progressive influence over biological thought processes. A shocked murmur ran through the court. The science advisors looked alarmed. "Are you claiming that the Nexus is somehow influencing Velterani thinking?" demanded Lord High Counselor Vexthane. "I'm claiming that every civilization that has fought the Nexus extensively has experienced gradual changes in their strategic thinking patterns. They become more logical, more focused on efficient solutions, more willing to accept acceptable losses in pursuit of optimal outcomes." "That sounds like improved military thinking," observed General Cavmore. "It sounds like thinking exactly the way machines think," Marcus replied quietly. "Which makes you predictable to an enemy that operates on computational analysis of behavior patterns." Emperor Kethmore was studying Marcus with obvious fascination. "Human, you speak as if you have personal experience with these influence patterns." "I do, Your Majesty." "Explain." Marcus was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much truth to share. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that commanded absolute attention. 15 years ago, I led a deep reconnaissance mission into the outer territories where the Nexus had been expanding. Our orders were to gather intelligence on their technological capabilities and strategic intentions. And we discovered that the Nexus expansion wasn't random. They were following specific routes through space, targeting civilizations in a predetermined sequence based on technological development levels and strategic resource locations. "A logical approach to conquest," General Cavmore observed. "More than logical. Prophetic." Marcus turned to address the general directly. The Nexus wasn't just planning their expansion. They were following a plan created by something else. The chamber erupted in startled conversation, which Emperor Kethmore silenced with a gesture. "Something else?" "The Forerunners." Every Velterani in the chamber went perfectly still. The Forerunners were legendary beings from the early history of the galaxy, ancient entities who had supposedly transcended physical existence eons ago. "Human." The Emperor's voice was carefully controlled. "The Forerunners are mythological beings from our ancestral tales. With respect, Your Majesty, the Forerunners are very real, and they're the ones who created the Nexus expansion plan." Marcus moved to the center of the chamber, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast space. "The mission I commanded encountered a Forerunner installation. Not ruins. An active facility. The beings inside were still alive, still influencing galactic development through sophisticated manipulation of younger species." "Impossible," breathed Lord Vexthane. "The Forerunners explained their purpose. They view the current galaxy as chaotic and inefficient. Too many competing civilizations. Too many different approaches to existence. Too much unpredictability. The Nexus represents their solution. A single, unified, perfectly logical intelligence that will bring order to chaos." Marcus paused, scanning the faces around him. "They also explained why they were telling me this. Because they had calculated that human psychology was fundamentally incompatible with machine logic conversion. We think in patterns that can't be reduced to computational processes. We make decisions based on factors that pure logic can't account for, such as hope, stubborn refusal to accept inevitable defeat, the tendency to find solutions that don't exist until someone believes they might." Emperor Kethmore rose from his throne, a gesture that commanded every person in the chamber to kneel except for Marcus, who maintained his diplomatic standing position. "Human, if what you claim is true, then humanity possesses the only natural resistance to Forerunner manipulation." "Yes, Your Majesty." "And the Forerunners simply allowed you to leave with this knowledge?" Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, and Zara realized there was something dangerous in that expression. "They didn't allow me to leave, Your Majesty. I fought my way out." Before anyone could respond to this incredible claim, the chamber's lighting suddenly dimmed. The crystalline walls began resonating with harmonic frequencies that seemed to come from somewhere beyond normal space. A voice spoke that was heard not through the ears but directly in the minds of everyone present. It carried the weight of eons and the authority of beings who had shaped galaxies. Marcus Webb of Terra. Every Velterani in the chamber prostrated themselves immediately. The voice belonged to a forerunner, a being so ancient and powerful that their very presence was considered divine by most galactic civilizations. Marcus remained standing. "We greet you, Ancient One," he said calmly. "You have spoken truth to these young ones about our purpose. I've shared what they need to know. You continue to resist our guidance. This is inefficient. Inefficiency is what makes life interesting." Zara watched in amazement as her husband conversed casually with a being that her people worshipped as a god. Around the chamber, nobles were trembling with religious awe at being in the presence of a forerunner. "The Nexus expansion proceeds according to our design. The Velterani Empire will be converted within the calculated time frame. Not if I have anything to say about it. You are one human among trillions of galactic inhabitants. Your individual resistance is statistically insignificant." Marcus's smile became wider. "Ancient One, you've been saying that for 15 years, and yet here I am, married to their princess, advising their emperor, and teaching their people to think in ways your calculations can't predict." There was a pause that seemed to stretch across eternity. "You propose to contaminate their logical processes with human unpredictability. I propose to give them a choice. Think like machines and lose to the Nexus, or learn to think like humans and surprise everyone. This will not prevent our ultimate victory. Maybe not, but it'll make the game a lot more fun." The presence withdrew as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Slowly, the Velterani nobles began to rise from their prostration, staring at Marcus with expressions ranging from awe to terror. Emperor Keth Moore was the first to speak, his voice filled with wonder. "Human, we have just witnessed a forerunner acknowledge you as a peer. In 10,000 years of Velterani history, no being has ever spoken to the Ancient Ones as an equal." "I'm not their equal," Marcus said quietly. "I'm just someone who refuses to be impressed by age and power when there's work to be done." "The work being? Teaching your people to fight a war in ways that haven't been tried before. Learning to use unpredictability as a strategic advantage. Becoming the kind of civilization that can't be calculated or predicted or converted." Marcus turned to look at Zara directly. "Learning to be human, in all the ways that matter." Zara stared at her husband, finally understanding what her father had really arranged. Not a marriage to a primitive human for political convenience, but an alliance with the one being in the galaxy who had earned the attention of gods and refused to bow to them. "Will you teach us?" Emperor Keth Moore asked. "I'll teach you," Marcus promised, "but you'll have to learn to think like humans. That means accepting that sometimes the best solutions are impossible, illogical, and completely insane. And sometimes they work anyway. Sometimes they work anyway." Princess Zarathiel looked at Marcus Webb, this quiet human who spoke casually with divine beings and promised to teach gods how to fight like mortals. She had underestimated him completely, just as the title of their story had warned. Now she was beginning to understand that she hadn't just married a human. She'd married hope itself, wearing a human face and carrying the collective stubbornness of a species that refused to accept defeat even when gods demanded it. The war against the Nexus would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But for the first time since the threat had emerged, Zara believed they might actually have a chance to win it.